right, let's begin at the beginning. The United States created the novel coronavirus that we just suffered through, yes or no?
I would say that they didn't create it, but they contributed to the research that led to it. And that's to say is that the U.S. government was very involved in funding the Chinese lab that did this research. And there was U.S. investigators that were very involved working collaboratively with that lab. And it doesn't make scientific sense to me that this COVID virus evolved from a bat to some animal that we've yet to find and then went into humans. I always remind people that when coronaviruses go from bats into an animal to humans, the one thing SARS and MERS have in common, when they finally got to humans, they didn't know how to efficiently transmit human to human. So when you look at the SARS outbreak 2000-2003, we had less than 1,000 cases. And even today, now many years later, we have less than 10,000 cases. Same thing with MERS. So when COVID started, it immediately was one of the most infectious viruses that we ever had for humans. So I'm of the point of view as a virologist, the only way that really happened was that virus had to be educated in how to infect humans. And we know that the lab in Wuhan published a paper in 2014-15 where they said they were successful in teaching coronavirus to bind to the H2 receptor, a human receptor, which was able then to infect humanized mice very efficiently.
Do you believe that COVID-19 was developed to kill as many people as possible and make us as sick as possible?
No, I believe, and this is, again, my own personal belief, I like to try to stay to the facts, whereas I think a lot of my virology is very factual. And I tell people there's absolutely no evidence for spillover. There's a lot of people that have the opinion that it came from spillover, but there's no real evidence if you really want to play hardball as a reporter investigator that you are. There is evidence for lab leak. All right, and you can argue, but there's a lot of opinions for spillover.
Spillover meaning the wet market.
Well, spillover the wet market or an animal.
Right.
Because it's an opinion. There's no data.
Right.
All right. We've thousands and thousands of animals, no data. It's just opinion. That gets me mad when people say all the evidence is. No, what evidence?
Right.
And I ask reporters like you to come back and say, what evidence? Just list me the evidence, because there isn't. But when you ask me, here's what I think. I think this lab was involved in dual-use research, all right? I think this lab was trying to develop a vaccine vector that could be used to vaccinate the Chinese military and the Chinese people and maybe the world in general. In order for the vector to be useful, it needed certain characteristics. One, it would be a lot better if it could be spread by aerosol or droplets. It's a lot easier. It's hard to find enough needles to vaccinate billions of people, right? But if you can just spread it around by sneezing, you got something that could maybe be a vaccine. It also, and therefore making it more transmissible, which we now know it is interesting, Chris, if you look critically, and I've always wondered why this wasn't pointed out in some of the interviews. If you look at COVID-19, which my critics say came from bats to some animal and then to people and then became very infectious in people, when, even though it's not like SARS or MERS, because it couldn't do efficient transmission in people, but when you look at that virus that now is in people and take COVID-19 and ask the question, can it infect bats? It's very inefficient in infecting bats. How'd that happen? Right? Well, it was engineered to change its receptor, so its preferred receptor was the human receptor.